Changes in f-stop progress according to a scale. Every time the f-stop goes up or down by a multiple of 1.4, you gain or lose a stop. Fortunately, no math is required. Fortunately, there's a standard progression. It looks like this. Every time the aperture moves up or down this chart by 1, you're gaining or losing a stop of light. If our aperture is set for f2.8 and we close the aperture down to f4, we're losing one stop of light, meaning that we cut the brightness of our image in half. If we're f4 and we open our aperture up to f2.8, we're gaining a stop of light and making the image twice as bright as it was before. You don't have to move in complete stops, of course. Most cameras will allow you to change the aperture in 1/3 or 1/2 of a stop increments. Each stop we move, we double or halve the brightness. So if we move 2 spaces, we're changing by 2 stops and multiplying or dividing the brightness by 4. If we move 3 stops, we're multiplying or dividing it by 8, and so on. Doubling or halving the shutter speed will change your exposure by a stop as well. But in the case of filmmaking as opposed to still photography, the shutter speed dramatically changes the appearance of movement. So unless you have a specific reason to change the shutter speed, you're going to be controlling exposure with the aperture alone. Here's one more important fact. Lenses just don't perform their best at their most open. They lose contrast and the image can look soft or almost even out of focus. If you have enough light to close your aperture a bit, do it. It'll make your images look much better. Every lens has a number of different characteristics, but the primary characteristic of any lens is its focal length. The focal length is a measurement, effectively, of how much of the image you can see and how much magnification the lens provides. The longer the focal length, the more telephoto the lens is called. The more magnification you have, and the narrower your angle of view. A shorter focal length, on the other hand, provides a wider angle of view, so you can see more of the image, but it provides less magnification. The video cameras we're used to using have zoom lenses built right into the bodies. But other than that, they still function exactly the same as these lenses. Now, if you've ever noticed that as you zoom in on here, the image actually gets darker, you're onto something. The reason for that is because at its widest setting, this is a maximum aperture of 1.6. But as you zoom in, you're really increasing the focal length of the lens, which decreases the maximum aperture. It may start out as a 1.6 when you're at your most wide, but as you zoom in, you get all the way to a 2.8, which is a loss of over 1.5 stops. That's pretty darn significant, especially when you're dealing with the low light conditions that you probably are.
So in conclusion, this has been Joshua Efron. Go make some films.